Marcus felt like he was swimming up from the bottom of a deep, dark ocean. His thoughts moved slowly like thick honey, and his body felt heavy and strange. Something was wrong, but he could not remember what. The last clear memory he had was of being on his research ship near Jupiter's largest moon, watching the scanner readings go crazy as some kind of space storm approached his vessel. He tried to open his eyes, but they felt like they were sealed shut. When he finally managed to crack them open, soft blue light flooded in and made him squint. The air around him glowed with tiny floating particles that danced and swirled like glowing dust. He was lying on something that felt smooth and warm, almost like it was alive. Marcus tried to sit up, but his muscles screamed in protest. Every part of his body ached like he had been hit by a truck, then run over by another truck, then maybe stepped on by an elephant for good measure. He managed to prop himself up on one elbow and looked around, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The room he was in looked like nothing he had ever seen before. The walls curved smoothly upward and seemed to be made of some kind of crystal that pulsed with soft light from within. There were no sharp corners anywhere, just flowing lines that reminded him of the inside of a seashell. The ceiling was high above him and covered with what looked like veins of light that branched out like the roots of a tree turned upside down. Strange sounds filled the air, soft humming noises and gentle chimes that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The glowing particles in the air moved in patterns that almost looked like they had purpose, swirling around certain areas and then moving on to others. The whole place felt alive in a way that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Marcus tried to remember how he had gotten here, but his memory was full of holes. He remembered the storm hitting his ship, remembered alarms going off and the hull groaning under some invisible pressure. He remembered the ship's computer warning him about radiation levels that were climbing toward lethal doses. After that, everything went black. A soft sound made him turn his head, and that was when he saw her. She was standing near what might have been a doorway, though it was hard to tell where the opening ended and the wall began. She was tall, maybe 6 feet, with a build that was clearly female but more delicate than any human woman he had ever seen. Her skin had a soft glow to it and seemed to shift between deep blue and silver as she moved, like oil on water in sunlight. Her face was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen, but it was also clearly not human. Her features were fine and sharp, with high cheekbones and a narrow chin. Her eyes were large and luminous, taking up more of her face than human eyes would, and they glowed with their own soft light. She had no hair that he could see, but her head was covered with what looked like delicate fins or maybe very thin feathers that moved gently as if in a breeze he could not feel. She was wearing something that looked like it was grown rather than made, a garment that flowed around her body like liquid and seemed to be the same material as her skin. In her hand, she held a device that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a piece of art, all flowing curves and soft lights. When she saw that he was awake, her eyes went wide with what looked like surprise and delight. She took a step closer, then stopped, as if she was not sure whether it was safe to approach. She tilted her head to one side in a gesture that reminded him of a curious bird, and made a sound that was musical and soft. Marcus tried to speak, but his throat felt like it was full of sand. When he finally managed to croak out a word, it came out as where... She jumped back slightly at the sound of his voice, then moved closer again, her expression full of fascination. She spoke then, and her voice was like nothing he had ever heard. It was musical and flowed like water, with tones that went up and down in patterns that were almost like singing. He could not understand a single word she said, but somehow the sound of it made him feel calmer. She seemed to realize that he did not understand, because she held up the device in her hands and touched something on its surface. Suddenly her voice changed, becoming more mechanical but still musical. "Can you understand me now?" she asked, and Marcus nearly jumped out of his skin because the words were in perfect English. "Yes," he managed to say, his voice still rough. "Yes, I can understand you." Her face lit up with what could only be described as joy. "Wonderful. I was not sure the translator would work with your language patterns. You have been unconscious for many cycles, and I was beginning to worry that your neural pathways had been too damaged to allow for communication." Marcus tried to process what she was saying. "How long have I been unconscious? Where am I? Who are you?" She set down her device and moved closer, her movements graceful and flowing. "You have been unconscious for what you would call 2 months. You are on the world we call Veltar, in the healing chambers of our medical facility. My name is Lyra, and I am what you might call a xenobiologist. I have been studying you and caring for you while our healing systems repair the damage to your body. Damage? Marcus asked, though even as he said it, he could feel that something was different about his body. He felt stronger than he should after being unconscious for 2 months, and some old aches and pains that he had carried for years seemed to be gone. Your ship was found drifting in the void between star systems, Lyra explained, settling down in what looked like a chair that grew off on the floor as she approached it. You were dying from massive radiation exposure. Your cellular structure was breaking down, and your body was shutting down system by system. Our scouts brought you here because it seemed wrong to let any thinking being die alone in the darkness. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He remembered the radiation warnings on his ship, but he had not realized how bad it had gotten. You saved my life. Our healing systems save your life, Lyra corrected. I merely watched over you and made sure the process went smoothly. It was fascinating, actually. Your species has a remarkable ability to heal and adapt. The healing nanites had completely rebuilt large portions of your cellular structure, but your body accepted the changes and even improved upon them in some ways. She gestured toward him with one long, delicate hand. You are actually healthier now than you were before the radiation exposure. Your muscle tone is better. Your bone density has increased, and we even corrected some genetic flaws that would have caused problems later in your life. Your species is remarkably resilient. Marcus tried to take all of this in. Alien technology had not only saved his life, but apparently made him better than he had been before. He looked at Lyra, who was watching him with those large, glowing eyes, and realized that she had spent 2 months taking care of him, a complete stranger from another species. Why? He asked. Why would you help someone you had never seen before? Lyra's expression became thoughtful, because it was the right thing to do. My people believe that all thinking beings have value, regardless of where they come from or what they look like. Besides, and here she smiled, an expression that transformed her already beautiful face into something that took his breath away. I was curious. You are the first of your species that any of us have ever encountered. I wanted to learn about you and your people. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes bright with interest. What is your name? What is your world like? How did you come to be so far from your home? Marcus realized that this was probably the most important conversation of his life. He was the first human this alien species had ever met, and what he said and did might determine how they thought about all of humanity forever. My name is Marcus, he said, trying to sit up straighter despite the lingering aches in his body. I come from a world called Earth, and I was exploring the outer regions of our star system when the accident happened. Lyra's smile grew wider. Marcus of Earth. I like the sound of that. Tell me, Marcus of Earth, what is your world like? What are your people like? As Marcus began to speak, telling this beautiful alien about humanity and Earth, he had no idea that his words would eventually change the fate of 2 entire species. All he knew was that he was alive, he was safe, and he was in the presence of someone who seemed genuinely interested in learning about him and his people. The glowing particles continued to dance in the air around them as Marcus began the greatest conversation of his life. Over the next few days, Marcus grew stronger with each passing hour. The healing chambers had done their work well, and he found himself able to walk and move around without the crushing fatigue that had plagued him when he first woke up. Lyra had become his constant companion, showing him around the medical facility and explaining how everything worked. The building itself was unlike anything Marcus had ever imagined. Instead of being constructed from metal and concrete like human buildings, it seemed to have been grown from some kind of living crystal. The walls breathed slowly, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that reminded him of sleeping lungs. Soft light flowed through veins in the ceiling, providing illumination that changed throughout the day to match natural cycles. Your people built this? Marcus asked as they walked through a corridor that curved gently upward. Lyra made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. Built is not the right word. We grew it. All of our structures are living organisms that we have shaped to serve our needs. This medical center has been growing for over 300 years, adding new sections as they are needed and healing itself when damaged. Marcus stopped walking and stared at the wall beside him. Now that he looked closely, he could see the slow movement of the crystal surface, like watching a plant grow in extreme slow motion. The whole building is alive. Everything in our cities is alive, Lyra explained, touching the wall with her palm. The crystal under her hand glowed brighter for a moment, as if responding to her touch. We learned long ago that living systems are far superior to mechanical ones. They can adapt, heal themselves, and grow to meet changing needs. Your species builds with dead materials and then wonders why your structures decay and fail. They emerge from the medical center onto what Lyra called an observation platform. Marcus's breath caught in his throat as he saw the city of Veltar spread out below them. It was like looking at a forest made of living jewels. Towers of crystal spiraled up from the ground, their surfaces shifting through every color Marcus could imagine. Gardens floated in the air between the towers, connected by bridges that looked like they were made of solidified light. Strange creatures that might have been birds or might have been something else entirely flew between the towers in flocks that moved like schools of fish. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy, and Marcus could hear music drifting up from the city below, though he could not tell if it was being played by instruments or sung by the buildings themselves. "How many people live here?" Marcus asked, his voice full of wonder. "About 2 million, Lyra replied, though live might not be the right word. We exist here, we grow here, we learn here. Your language does not have good words for the way we experience existence." As they walked through the city over the following days, Marcus began to understand what she meant. The Keth-Moran people seemed to flow through their daily lives with a grace and purpose that was unlike anything he had seen in human society. There was no rushing, no anger, no shouting or arguing. Everyone he met greeted Lyra warmly and looked at him with curiosity rather than fear or suspicion. "Have your people ever fought wars?" Marcus asked one day as they sat in what Lyra called a knowledge garden, where information flowed to the air in streams of light that could be touched and absorbed. Lyra's expression became sad. "Long ago, yes, many thousands of years ago, our ancestors fought terrible wars that nearly destroyed our world. But we learned that violence only creates more violence. Hatred only breeds more hatred. We chose a different path." She gestured toward the streams of light flowing around them. "Instead of fighting, we learned. Instead of destroying, we created. Instead of taking from others, we found ways for everyone to have what they needed. It took many generations, but eventually war became something our people simply could not conceive of doing." Marcus watched a group of young Keth-Moran playing a game that seemed to involve catching and reshaping the light streams. "What do you do when someone threatens you?" "Threatens us how?" Lyra asked, genuinely puzzled. "If someone needs something we have, we share it. If someone is angry with us, we try to understand why and fix the problem. If someone is hurt, we heal them. What other kinds of threats could there be?" Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. These people were so peaceful, so trusting, that they could not even imagine the kinds of dangers that exist in the universe. What if someone wanted to take your world away from you? What if they wanted to kill your people just because they could? Lyra stared at him for a long moment. "Do such beings really exist?" "Yes," Marcus said quietly. "In my part of the galaxy, they do." That evening, Lyra took him to meet with a council of speakers, the group that guided their society. The meeting took place in a chamber at the heart of the city, where 12 elderly Keth-Moran sat in a circle around a pool of living light. When Marcus entered, their large eyes fixed on him with intense curiosity. "So you are the being from beyond the far stars," said the eldest of them, an ancient Keth-Moran whose skin had faded to pure silver with age. "Lyra tells us that your people are warriors." Marcus chose his words carefully. "My people have fought many wars, yes, but we also build beautiful things and create art and music and stories. We explore and learn and try to make life better for our children." "Yet you fight," said another council member. "Why?" Marcus thought about how to explain human history to beings who had lived in peace for thousands of years. Sometimes fighting is the only way to protect what you love. Sometimes there are people who want to hurt others, and the only way to stop them is with force. The council members exchanged glances that Marcus could not interpret. "We have studied your vessel," the eldest said. The weapon systems, the armor plating, the tactical computers. Your entire ship was designed for war. It was a research vessel, Marcus protested. Yes, the elder agreed, but it was also ready for battle at any moment. Every system on your ship could be turned to violence if needed. Even your tools of learning and discovery were also tools of war. Marcus realized they were right. Even civilian human ships carried weapons and armor because space was dangerous and you never knew what you might encounter. We have to be ready to defend ourselves. The universe is not always a safe place. Perhaps, said a younger council member, that is because your people make it unsafe. The word stung, but Marcus forced himself to stay calm. Maybe, but we also make it safer sometimes. When pirates attack a colony, someone has to stop them. When a plague breaks out, someone has to find a cure. When a star goes nova and threatens a whole system, someone has to evacuate the people living there. Over the following weeks, Marcus shared stories of human history with Lyra and anyone else who would listen. He told them about the wars, yes, but also about the heroes who had risked everything to save others. He told them about human exploration, about the drive to see what was beyond the next hill or the next star. He told them about human art and music and literature, about the way humans could find beauty in the strangest places. In return, Lyra showed him the wonders of Kethmoran's science and philosophy. She took him to the archives where the history of her people was stored in crystals that sang their stories when touched. She showed him the gardens where they grew food that was also medicine, and medicine that was also food. She introduced him to their artists, who shaped light and sound and even time itself into patterns of incredible beauty. Your people are amazing, Marcus told her one day as they watched the sunset paint the crystal towers in shades of gold and purple. You've created something beautiful here. Something perfect. Not perfect, Lyra said softly. We still have problems, still make mistakes. And perhaps we have become too isolated, too comfortable. Your stories of your people's struggles make me wonder if we have lost something important in our quest for peace. What do you mean? Lyra was quiet for a moment, watching the light fade from the sky. Your people face danger and hardship, but they grow stronger because of it. They adapt, they change, they overcome obstacles that would defeat us. We have been safe for so long that I wonder if we have forgotten how to be strong. That night, as Marcus lay in the chamber that had been prepared for him, he thought about what Lyra had said. The Kethmoran had created a paradise, but it was a fragile paradise. They had no enemies because they had forgotten that enemies could exist. They had no weapons because they could not imagine needing them. He hoped they would never need to learn how wrong they were. But deep in his heart, Marcus had a feeling that the peaceful days on Veltar were numbered. In his experience, paradise never lasted long when it existed in a universe full of people who wanted to take it away from those who had built it. As he drifted off to sleep, he made a silent promise that if danger ever came to this beautiful world and these gentle people, he would do everything in his power to protect them. It was the least he could do for those who had saved his life and shown him such kindness. The question was whether one human would be enough to make a difference when that day came. Marcus had been on Veltar for 3 months when the sky began to change. He was sitting with Lyra in her favorite garden, a floating platform covered with plants that sang in harmony with the wind, when the first ships appeared. At first they looked like new stars, tiny points of light that moved slowly across the heavens. But as the hours passed, they grew larger and brighter, and Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Those are not natural, he said, pointing upward. Those are ships. Lyra followed his gaze and tilted her head in that curious way she had. Ships? You mean vessels like the one you came in? Much bigger, Marcus said, his voice tight with worry. And there are a lot of them. The Kethmoran had detection systems, but they were designed to watch for natural disasters like solar storms and asteroid impacts. They had never needed to watch for hostile visitors because in their long history, no one had ever come to their world with bad intentions. Their scanners could tell them that the approaching objects were artificial, but they had no way to determine if they were friendly or dangerous. Within hours, the Council of Speakers had assembled to discuss this unprecedented situation. Marcus sat beside Lyra in the great chamber, watching the 12 elderly Kethmoran debate what to do. Their discussion was calm and measured, as all their conversations were. But Marcus could see the confusion and uncertainty in their large, luminous eyes. "Perhaps they are explorers like Marcus," suggested one council member. "They may have come seeking knowledge or assistance." "We should prepare a welcome ceremony," said another. "If they have traveled far to reach us, they will be tired and in need of hospitality." Marcus stood up, unable to stay quiet any longer. "You need to prepare your defenses." The council members looked at him with expressions of polite bewilderment. "Defenses?" asked the eldest. "What do you mean?" "Weapons," Marcus said. "Shields. Ways to protect your people if those ships are not here for a friendly visit." "But why would they not be friendly?" asked Lyra. "What reason would they have to harm us?" Marcus felt like he was trying to explain color to someone who had been born blind. These people had lived in peace for so long that they literally could not imagine why anyone would want to hurt them. Some beings take things because they can. Some destroy because they enjoy destruction. Some kill because they think it makes them strong. The council members exchanged those unreadable glances again. "Such beings must be very sick," said one. "We should prepare healing chambers for them." Before Marcus could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the city. But these were not the harsh, urgent alarms that humans would use to warn of danger. They were soft, musical tones that seemed designed to inform rather than frighten. The meaning was clear, though. The approaching ships had been identified as a threat. A young Kethmoran rushed into the council chamber, his normally calm demeanor replaced by obvious distress. "Speakers, the scanning arrays have detected energy signatures from the approaching vessels. They are charging what appear to be weapon systems." The council members fell silent, their faces showing an emotion Marcus had never seen on any Kethmoran before: fear. Not the quick, sharp fear that humans felt in moments of danger, but a deep, confused terror of something they had no experience dealing with. "Perhaps it is a misunderstanding," the eldest speaker said finally. "We should try to communicate with them." For the next several hours, the Kethmoran tried to make contact with the approaching fleet. They broadcast messages of welcome in hundreds of languages, sent mathematical proofs to show their intelligence, even transmitted samples of their music and art to demonstrate their peaceful intentions. The response was silence. Marcus spent those hours studying the enemy ships through the Kethmoran scanning systems. What he saw made his worst fears seem optimistic. The vessels were massive, built like dark metal wedges with no windows or decorative elements. They moved in perfect formation with mechanical precision that spoke of artificial intelligence rather than living crews. Along their hulls, Marcus could see the distinctive shapes of harvesting equipment. Not the tools of exploration, but the instruments of strip mining and resource extraction. "They are called devourers," he told the assembled council when the first ships entered the planet's atmosphere. "My people have heard stories about them from traders in the outer systems. They are not alive, not really. They are machines built by a dead race, programmed to consume everything organic they encounter to fuel their own expansion." "Machines?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "But how can machines make choices? How can they decide to hurt people?" "They do not make choices," Marcus explained. "They follow their programming. They were built to harvest resources, and to them, your entire world is just a resource to be consumed." The first Devourer ship landed in the crystal plains outside the city with a sound like breaking glass. It was enormous, easily the size of a human city block, and as black as the space between stars. Immediately, smaller machines began pouring out its cargo bays, spider-like harvesters that began cutting into the living crystal formations with beams of coherent energy. Within minutes, more ships were landing across the planet's surface. The Kethmoran watched in horror as their beautiful crystal forests were cut down and fed into massive processing units. The harvesters worked with ruthless efficiency, stripping away everything organic and converting it into raw materials that were loaded back onto the ships. "We must evacuate the outer settlements," the eldest speaker said, his voice shaking. "Bring everyone to the protected cities." "Protected by what?" Marcus asked. "Your cities are grown from the same crystal as everything else." To the Devourers, they are just another resource to be harvested. As if to prove his point, a squadron of smaller Devourer ships appeared over the city's outskirts. They began methodically destroying the outer towers with weapons that turned living crystal into clouds of glittering dust. The beautiful structures that had taken centuries to grow were reduced to nothing in seconds. The Keth Moran had emergency shelters, deep chambers carved into the bedrock beneath their cities. But they were designed for natural disasters that lasted hours or days. They were not equipped to sustain millions of people for the months or years it might take for the Devourers to strip the planet bare and move on to their next target. "We could surrender," suggested one council member. "Perhaps if we offer them what they want, they will leave our people alone." "They want everything," Marcus said. "Your cities, your forests, your oceans, the air you breathe. They will not stop until this world is a dead rock floating in space." "Then what do you suggest?" asked the eldest speaker. Marcus looked around the chamber at the 12 most powerful leaders of a peaceful civilization, seeing the helplessness in their eyes. They had the technology to fight back. Their energy systems were more advanced than anything humans had developed. Their material science was centuries ahead of Earth's capabilities. But they had no weapons, no military organization, no understanding of how to wage war. "You have to fight them," he said. The silence that followed his words stretched on for long minutes. Finally, one of the younger council members spoke. "We do not know how to fight. We had not fought a war in over 5,000 years. "Then you need to learn," Marcus said, "and you need to learn fast." Through the crystal walls of the chamber, they could see the glow of fires burning in the distance as more Devourer ships landed and began their destructive harvest. The beautiful spires of the outer city were falling one by one, their light dying as the machines consumed them. Lyra moved closer to Marcus, her luminous eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Can you teach us? Can you show us how to fight these things?" Marcus looked at her, at the trust and desperation in her face, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. He was one human against an army of machines, trying to teach a peaceful species how to wage war against an enemy that had never known defeat. "I can try," he said, "but you have to understand what you are asking. Fighting changes you. War changes everyone who touches it. Even if we win, your people will never be the same. If we do not fight, there will be no people left to change," the eldest speaker said quietly. Outside, another crystal tower fell to the Devourer weapons, its death song echoing across the city like a funeral dirge. The peaceful paradise of Veltar was dying, and only the ancient human knowledge of violence and warfare stood between the Keth Moran and extinction. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of all the human conflicts he had studied, all the battles his species had fought over millennia. Humanity had paid a terrible price to learn the arts of war, but now that knowledge might be the only thing that could save an entire civilization. When he opened his eyes, he saw that every Keth Moran in the chamber was looking at him with a mixture of hope and fear. They were asking him to teach them how to kill, how to destroy, how to become everything they had spent thousands of years learning not to be. "All right," he said, "but we start now and we start fast. The Devourers will not wait for you to learn." The war for Veltar was about to begin. The first lesson Marcus taught the Keth Moran was the hardest one of all. He took Lyra and 20 volunteers to the ruins of what had been a beautiful crystal garden just hours before. Now it was nothing but broken fragments and scorch marks where the Devourer harvesting machines had passed through. The air still smelled of burned ozone and melted crystal. "This is what war looks like," Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. "This is what the enemy does to everything beautiful and peaceful. If you want to stop them from doing this to your entire world, you have to be willing to do worse things to them." One of the volunteers, a young Keth Moran named Kale, knelt beside a broken crystal flower that had once sung in harmony with the wind. Now it was silent and dark. "How can we become like them? How can we choose to destroy?" "You do not become like them," Marcus explained. "You become something they cannot understand or predict. They are machines following a program. They expect you to run away or surrender. They do not expect you to fight back, and they certainly do not expect you to fight smart." Over the next 3 days, while Devourer ships continued landing across the planet's surface, Marcus worked with Lyra's research team to understand what resources they had available. The Keth Moran had never built weapons, but they had technologies that could be adapted for war if someone knew how to think like a warrior instead of scientist. Their healing nanites were designed to repair damaged tissue and accelerate natural healing processes. Marcus showed them how the same nanites could be programmed to attack mechanical systems, eating through metal and disrupting electronic circuits. Their growth acceleration compounds, normally used to help injured plants recover quickly, could be modified to become acids that would dissolve devourer armor in seconds. "Your people are brilliant," Marcus told Lyra as they worked in her laboratory, converting medical scanners into targeting systems. "You just think about problems differently than humans do. You look for ways to heal and build. I look for ways to break and destroy. Is that a good thing?" Lyra asked, her hand shaking slightly as she modified a device that had been designed to save lives, so that it could take them instead. "Right now, it is the only thing that matters," Marcus said. The Keth Moran communication network was another system that could be weaponized. It was designed to carry information instantly across vast distances using quantum entangled particles. Marcus realized that the same network could carry viruses and disruption signals directly into Devourer command systems. If they could get close enough to establish a connection, they could potentially shut down entire ships with nothing but corrupted data. But having weapons was only the first step. The Keth Moran also needed to learn how to use them, and more importantly, they needed to learn how to think like fighters instead of scholars. This proved to be the most difficult challenge of all. "Forget everything you know about being fair," Marcus told his small group of volunteers as they practiced in the underground chambers beneath the city. "Forget about fighting honorably or giving your enemy a chance. The Devourers will not show you mercy, so you cannot afford to show them any either." He taught them about ambush tactics, showing them how to hide in the crystal formations and strike at Devourer harvesters when they were most vulnerable. He explained the concept of guerrilla warfare, how a small force could defeat a much larger enemy by refusing to fight on the enemy's terms. "Never fight fair," he said over and over again. "Fair fights are for sports and games. In war, fair fights get you killed. Always outnumber your enemy. Always have better weapons. Always know the terrain better than they do." The first successful operation happened on the 4th day after the invasion began. A group of Devourer harvesters had moved into the ruins of the Eastern District, methodically cutting down crystal structures and feeding them into their processing units. Marcus led a team of 12 Keth Moran through maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the district, emerging behind the enemy machines. The attack was over in less than 5 minutes. The modified healing nanites ate through the harvester's armor like acid through paper, while disruption signals transmitted through the communication network crashed their computer systems. 8 Devourer machines were destroyed without the Keth Moran losing a single person. "We did it," Kale whispered, staring at the smoking wreckage of the enemy machines. "We actually hurt them." But Marcus knew better than to celebrate too early. The Devourers were not stupid. Even if they were machines, they would adapt to this new threat, just as they had adapted to every other enemy they had encountered in their long journey across the galaxy. Sure enough, within hours the enemy had changed their tactics. The harvester machines now moved in larger groups with heavy escort units. They established defensive perimeters around their landing sites and deployed patrol drones to watch for ambushes. The easy victories were over. "Good," Marcus said when the scouts reported the enemy's new defensive measures. "Now they are taking us seriously. That means we are hurting them enough to matter." He began teaching the Keth Moran more advanced tactics. How to create false targets to draw enemy forces away from real objectives. How to coordinate simultaneous attacks across multiple locations to spread the enemy thin. How to use the Devourer's own strengths against them by turning their mechanical precision into a weakness. "They think like machines because they are machines," he explained during a planning session in one of the deep shelters. "They follow logical patterns and make predictable choices. But logic is not always the best way to win a fight. Sometimes you have to do something so crazy and unexpected that the enemy cannot plan for it." The next major operation was exactly that kind of crazy plan. Marcus had noticed that the Devourer ships used gravity generators to land safely on the planet's surface. The generators created localized fields that allowed the massive vessels to settle gently without damaging their own equipment. But what would happen if those gravity fields were suddenly reversed? Working with the Kethmoran's best engineers, Marcus designed a virus that could infiltrate the Devourer command systems through their own communication networks. The virus would wait until it detected the specific energy signature of an active gravity generator, then reverse the field's polarity at maximum power. The plan worked better than anyone had hoped. When the virus activated, 6 Devourer ships were suddenly pulled upward by their own gravity generators with tremendous force. 4 of them crashed back down onto the planet's surface, their hulls cracking open like broken eggs. 2 were flung out into space, tumbling end over end as their crews struggled to regain control. The victory sent shockwaves through both armies. The Kethmoran began to believe that they might actually have a chance to save their world. The Devourers, for the first time in their long history of conquest, faced an enemy that fought in ways their programming could not predict or counter. But Marcus knew that the real test was still to come. The Devourers had committed only a fraction of their total force to the initial invasion. Now that they realized Veltar would not be an easy conquest, they would bring in their heavy assault units and their most advanced war machines. "We have hurt them," he told the council of speakers during an emergency meeting, "but we have also made them angry. They will not underestimate us again." "What do you recommend?" asked the eldest speaker. The old Kethmoran looked exhausted, his silver skin dulled by the stress of watching his peaceful world torn apart by war. "We prepare for the real fight," Marcus said. "Everything we have done so far has been practice. The Devourers will bring their full military force to bear on this world, and when they do, we need to be ready to hit them harder than they have ever been hit before." Lyra looked up from the tactical displays she had been studying. "Can we win?" Marcus met her eyes, seeing the fear and hope warring in their luminous depths. He thought about the massive Devourer fleet still in orbit around the planet, about the millions of war machines they could deploy if pushed too far. He thought about the small force of newly trained Kethmoran fighters who were still learning the difference between a scalpel and a sword. "I do not know," he said honestly, "but I know that we have something the Devourers do not have. We have the ability to change, to adapt, to do things that have never been done before. And sometimes that is enough." Outside the shelter, the war for Veltar continued. Devourer harvesters worked day and night to strip away the planet's resources, while small teams of Kethmoran fighters struck at them from the shadows. The beautiful crystal forests were dying, the floating gardens had fallen from the sky, and the songs of the living buildings had been silenced by enemy weapons. But in the deep places beneath the surface, something new was being born. The peaceful Kethmoran were learning the harsh lessons of war, guided by the hard-won wisdom of a species that had fought its way up from a savage world to touch the stars. It was a transformation that would either save them all or destroy everything they had once been. The final battle was coming, and only time would tell which would prove stronger: the mechanical perfection of the Devourers or the chaotic adaptability of the alliance between human cunning and Kethmoran science. The final battle began when the largest Devourer mothership descended from orbit like a dark metal moon. It was 10 times bigger than any vessel Marcus had ever seen, big enough to carry an entire mechanical army inside its hull. As it settled into the atmosphere above the capital city, smaller ships poured from its docking bays like angry insects from a disturbed nest. Marcus stood on the highest observation platform in the city, watching the enemy deployment through borrowed Kethmoran scanning equipment. Beside him, Lyra and the other resistance leaders waited for his assessment. 2 months of guerrilla warfare had taught them to trust his judgment about military matters, even when his plans seemed impossible. "They are bringing everything they have," Marcus said, studying the energy readings from a massive ship. Heavy assault mechs, aerial hunter units, siege engines designed to crack open fortified cities. "They mean to end this war today." "Can we stop them?" asked Kale, who had become one of their best field commanders despite having no military experience before the invasion began. Marcus looked at the small force they had assembled. 300 Kethmoran fighters, armed with converted medical equipment, and powered by righteous anger at the destruction of their world. Against them, the Devourers were deploying over 10,000 war machines, each one designed for nothing but efficient killing. "Not by fighting them directly," Marcus said. "But we do not have to beat their entire army. We just have to destroy their command ship." The plan he outlined was insane by any reasonable military standard. While the bulk of the Devourer forces were focused on attacking the city's outer defenses, a small team would infiltrate the mothership and plant a virus directly into its central computer. The virus would not only shut down the command vessel, but also send cascading failure signals to every other Devourer unit on the planet. It will work, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. The Devourers have never faced an enemy that could penetrate their ship defenses. They will not expect anyone to be crazy enough to attack their flagship, while it is surrounded by their entire fleet. Lyra stepped forward, her luminous eyes bright with determination. I am going with you. No, Marcus said immediately. This is a suicide mission. Even if we succeed, we probably will not make it out alive. Then you will need someone who understands Kethmoran technology well enough to interface with their systems, Lyra replied. And someone who can modify the virus in real time if their defenses are different than we expect. Marcus wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. The virus they had created was based on captured Devourer technology, but they had no way of knowing how the command ship systems might be different. They needed someone who could adapt on the fly, and Lyra was the best scientist they had. Fine, he said, but we do this my way, and if I tell you to run, you run. The infiltration began at dawn, as the Devourer assault forces launched their final attack on the city. While explosions lit up the sky and the crystal towers shook under enemy bombardment, Marcus and Lyra's team used maintenance tunnels to reach the landing site of the mothership. The massive vessel had settled onto the crystal plains like a mountain of black metal. Its hull was scarred by centuries of battles across the galaxy, and weapons turrets bristled from every surface. Guard drones patrolled the perimeter in precise geometric patterns, their sensors sweeping for any sign of enemy activity. Remember, Marcus whispered to his team as they crouched in the ruins of a crystal formation near the ship's base. We have one shot at this. Once we are inside, there is no backup plan, and no cavalry coming to save us. We succeed or we die trying. Getting inside the ship was easier than expected. The Devourers had never encountered an enemy capable of stealth infiltration, so their security was designed to stop frontal assaults rather than covert penetration. Using modified medical scanners to map the ship's internal structure, the team found an intake vent that led directly to the central processing core. The interior of the mothership was a nightmare of mechanical efficiency. Corridors stretched for kilometers in perfectly straight lines, lit by harsh white lights that cast no shadows. The air was filled with the constant humming of machinery and the rhythmic clank of automated systems. Everything was designed for function rather than comfort, because machines did not need beauty or rest. They encountered their first patrol drone 15 minutes after entering the ship. The spider-like machine rounded a corner just as Marcus was checking the route ahead. For a moment, human and machine stared at each other in mutual surprise. Then Marcus drew the converted healing tool from his belt and fired a stream of nanites directly into the drone's sensor array. The machine collapsed in a shower of sparks, its computer brain eaten away by nanites designed to repair organic tissue but deadly to electronic systems. But its destruction had triggered an alarm, and suddenly the corridors were filled with the sound of approaching footsteps. Not the soft footfalls of living beings, but the metallic clang of mechanical soldiers. "Run!" Marcus shouted, and the team sprinted down the corridor toward their objective. Behind them, combat drones poured out of side passages like a silver tide, their weapons charging with deadly energy. The central computer core was a vast chamber filled with crystalline processors that pulsed with data flows. It was beautiful in its own alien way, like a cathedral built for worshipping information instead of gods. But there was no time to admire the architecture. The sound of pursuing drones was getting closer with every second. Lyra plugged her portable computer into the main data trunk, while Marcus and the others set up defensive positions at the chamber's entrances. The virus began uploading immediately, but the process would take several minutes to complete. Minutes they might not have. The first wave of drones arrived just as the upload reached 20% completion. They poured to the doorways like a flood of metal death, their weapons spitting coherent energy at anything that moved. 2 of the Kethmoran fighters fell in the first seconds of combat, their bodies torn apart by energies meant to cut through starship armor. Marcus fought like a man possessed, using every dirty trick and combat technique he had ever learned. He used the chamber's own equipment as cover, diving behind data processors and using them as shields. He threw improvised explosives made from modified medical supplies, filling the air with clouds of metal-eating nanites that turned the drones' weapons against themselves. 60%, Lyra called out, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. A drone broke through the defensive line and charged directly at her. Marcus intercepted it with his bare hands, tackling the machine to the ground and jamming his weapon directly into its central processor. The drone exploded in a burst of flame and sparks that left him burned and bleeding, but Lyra was safe. 80%, she said. More drones poured into the chamber. Kale fell defending the eastern entrance, his body riddled with energy wounds. 3 more Kethmoran fighters died, holding the western door. The beautiful crystal processors were shattered and burning, but still the virus continued its inexorable upload. 95%, Lyra whispered. A massive combat unit, twice the size of the other drones, smashed through the chamber's main wall. Its weapons were powerful enough to vaporize a human in seconds, and it turned them toward Lyra with mechanical precision. Marcus threw himself between them, feeling the energy blast tear through his chest like liquid fire. The pain was beyond description, but he stayed on his feet long enough to empty his weapon into the drone's sensor cluster. It staggered backward, blinded and confused. 100%, Lyra said, and pressed the activation key. The virus spread to the mothership systems like wildfire through dry grass. Every screen in the chamber went dark, then flashed with cascading error messages as critical systems began shutting down. The combat drones froze in place as their command signals were cut off, then collapsed as their power systems failed. Throughout the ship, emergency lights flickered and died. The constant humming of machinery faded to silence. In orbit above the planet, the smaller Devourer vessels began drifting as their connection to the command ship was severed. On the surface, thousands of war machines simply stopped moving, their mechanical brains suddenly empty of purpose. Marcus collapsed beside the computer terminal, his vision fading as blood pooled beneath him. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands glowing with healing energy as she tried desperately to repair the damage to his body. "Did we win?" he whispered. Through the shattered walls of the chamber, they could see the sky beginning to clear as the Devourer ships fell silent. In the distance, the sounds of battle were fading as a mechanical army shut down across the planet. "We won," Lyra said, tears streaming down her face. "But the cost..." Marcus looked around the chamber at the bodies of the Kethmoran, who had died to save their world. Good people who had learned to fight and kill because there was no other choice. Their sacrifice had saved millions, but that did not make their deaths any easier to bear. "War always has a cost," he said softly. "The question is whether what you save is worth what you lose." In the months that followed, Veltar began to heal. The crystal forest grew back slowly, and new cities rose from the ashes of the old ones. But the Kethmoran were changed forever. They had learned that the universe was not always peaceful, that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. Some blamed Marcus for bringing the poison of war to their world. Others hailed him as the savior who had taught them to defend themselves. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. When his wounds had healed enough for him to travel, Marcus was offered a choice: stay on Veltar and help rebuild, or take a ship constructed with both human and Kethmoran technology to return to human space. He chose a third option. With Lyra beside him, he set out to find other peaceful worlds that might need protection from the darkness between the stars. Together, they would forge an alliance between species, combining human strength with alien wisdom to create something greater than either could achieve alone. The ship that carried them away from Veltar was like nothing that had ever existed before. It was grown rather than built, shaped by Kethmoran biotechnology, but armed with weapons that reflected hard-won human understanding of war. It was a perfect fusion of two very different approaches to existence. As they approached their first destination, a Kethmoran colony world under attack by raiders, Marcus felt a familiar mixture of anticipation and dread. There would be more fighting, more death, more difficult choices ahead. But there would also be worlds saved and people protected. There would be the satisfaction of standing between predators and their prey, of using strength to defend those who could not defend themselves. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a human solution, and sometimes that was enough.